Dominic Vance knew something was wrong long before he set foot on American soil. The video calls had grown shorter, and his wife Nora's excuses were more frequent. Their 15 years of marriage had weathered 3 deployments before, but something had shifted during this 4th tour in Afghanistan. As a Special Forces operative skilled in intelligence and psychological warfare, Dominic's instincts rarely failed him. "You're overthinking," said Wade Thornton, Dominic's closest friend and teammate, as they prepared to board their flight home. "Nora is probably just planning some big surprise." Dominic tucked the handmade drawings from his children, Bella, 12, and Mason, 9, into his chest pocket. "Maybe, but Mason didn't even want to talk to me last week. And Bella, she seemed different." Kids change fast at that age, Wade reasoned, but his eyes betrayed concern. What Wade didn't know was that Dominic had already contacted his old friend from the intelligence division, Lawson Reed. After his 3rd deployment, Dominic had developed contingency plans, not because he distrusted Nora, but because his work had taught him to prepare for every scenario. The encrypted message to Lawson had been brief. Surveillance Protocol Delta, family only, information gathering. Dominic was 42 with 17 years of military service that had left its mark, physically in the form of a jagged scar across his left jawline from a close call in Kandahar, and mentally in the form of a ruthless efficiency when dealing with threats. The military had found his analytical mind and unflinching resolve valuable, especially when paired with his ability to remain eerily calm during chaos. His superior officer, Colonel Harding, had once described him as the most polite man who could end a fight 6 different ways before you finished your coffee. Dominic had simply nodded and said, "7, sir, if the coffee is hot." Their plane landed at Washington Dulles at 5:43 hours. As the other men rushed to reunite with their families, Dominic deliberately took his time. He'd received Lawson's preliminary report 2 hours prior, during their layover. Subject: N visits residence of unknown male 3 to 4 times weekly. Children present on weekend visits. Close relationship confirmed. Subject appears to have removed multiple personal items from your shared residence. Dominic had read it with the same detachment he used when reviewing mission briefs, cataloging facts, assessing the situation, and refusing to allow emotion to cloud his judgment. Only the slight tightening of his grip on his phone betrayed his true feelings. "You coming, Dom?" Wade called from the exit ramp. "Go ahead," Dominic replied with a calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I need to make a call." Wade hesitated. After 15 years together in the field, he knew when something was off. "Look, Dom, whatever you're thinking, remember you've got people who care about you. Don't go dark on us." "I appreciate the concern," Dominic said, his voice measured and controlled. "But some battles you fight alone." As Wade reluctantly left, Dominic made a second call, this one to a private number he'd never used before. "Authorization, Sigma 9 Tango," he stated without preamble, requesting full background on civilian male approximately 35 to 40, residing at 1872 Oak Ridge Drive, priority classification. The voice on the other end paused. "Confirmation required. This is outside standard protocol." "The favor Commander Ellis owes me from Tyron," Dominic replied coldly. "Tell him it's time to pay up." "Understood. Data package will be delivered within 12 hours. Dominic ended the call and finally headed toward the exit. Rather than taking a taxi directly home, he checked into a hotel. From his room, he made one final call to his bank. By 8 hours, he had transferred half of their joint savings to a private account, leaving exactly enough in the shared account to avoid immediate suspicion. For the next several hours, Dominic methodically prepared, not in anger, but with the calculating precision that had kept him alive in hostile territory for years. The stranger who had infiltrated his home had no idea what was coming. The suburban home Dominic had purchased 8 years ago stood exactly as he remembered. White siding, blue shutters, and the oak tree he'd planted when Mason was born. The flower beds Nora had always meticulously maintained showed signs of neglect, weeds pushing through between dying petunias. It was 16:30 hours when he approached the front door, a calculated time when both children would likely be home from school. His key still worked. The interior smelled different. An unfamiliar cologne lingered beneath the scent of a roast cooking in the kitchen. He heard Nora before he saw her, laughing in the kitchen with a deeper voice responding. Then came the voices of his children, but their words froze his blood. "Dad, can we go to the lake this weekend?" Mason asked excitedly. "I don't know, champ," the man's voice answered. "I'll need to check my schedule at the clinic." Dominic set his duffel bag down deliberately, the thud announcing his presence. The house fell silent. "Dominic?" Nora uttered as she emerged from the kitchen, her face draining of color. At 40, she remained striking, auburn hair now professionally highlighted, wearing an outfit he'd never seen before. You didn't tell us when you'd be back." Behind her appeared a tall man with a surgeon's confident posture and a weary expression. "Nora, is everything—" He stopped when he saw Dominic. "Dad!" Mason raced forward but halted awkwardly several feet away, confusion evident on his face. Bella remained in the kitchen doorway, her eyes wide with something like guilt. "You're back early," she said, her voice small. "On time, actually," Dominic replied calmly, setting his gaze on the stranger. "I don't believe we've met." "Dominic, this is Dr. Bryce Harlow," Nora stammered. "He's a neurosurgeon at Memorial." "I see." Dominic nodded politely, his expression betraying nothing of the calculations running through his mind. "And apparently dad to my children now." Dr. Harlow stepped forward with professional composure. "Major Vance, I understand this is awkward. Perhaps we should discuss this like adults, for the children's sake." "My thoughts exactly," Dominic agreed with unnerving calm. "Children, please go to your rooms for a few minutes." "But Dad," Mason began, looking at Bryce, then correcting himself. "Now, Mason," Dominic said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The children retreated upstairs, Bella dragging a reluctant Mason. Once they were gone, Dominic turned to Nora. "I believe there's something you wanted to tell me." "I was going to call you," Nora said, tears beginning to form. "But I didn't want to distract you while you were in a war zone. Bryce and it just happened, Dominic. You were gone so much." 15 years of marriage and it just happened?" Dominic echoed, his voice devoid of emotion. "How long?" 7 months, Bryce answered when Nora hesitated. "And to be clear, Nora told me you two were separated when we met." Dominic nodded as if receiving a routine briefing. "Interesting. And the children calling you Dad, that just happened too." "That was recent," Nora admitted. "We've explained that you'll always be their father, but you're being replaced," Dominic finished for her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out divorce papers. "Interesting coincidence. I had these drawn up during my layover." Nora blinked in confusion. "You knew?" "Did you really think I wouldn't?" Dominic asked quietly. "I've spent my career identifying threats and eliminating them. Did you think I wouldn't notice when one appeared in my own home?" Bryce stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Nora. "I think it's time you left, Major. We can arrange a time for you to see the children later, when emotions aren't running so high." Dominic looked at the man's hand on his wife's shoulder, then reached for his duffel bag. "I've already left. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow regarding custody arrangements and division of assets." As he turned to leave, Nora called after him. "Dominic, wait. Your uniform. I packed it away. The kids and we were angry. It's in the garage." He paused at the door. "Keep it. You seem to enjoy discarding things that have served their purpose." He was nearly to his rental car when he heard the front door open again. Bryce jogged down the driveway after him. "Major Vance," he called. "I understand you're upset, but threatening us, even subtly, won't help anyone." Dominic turned with a slight smile. "Dr. Harlow, if I were threatening you, there would be nothing subtle about it. I was simply stating facts." "Then we understand each other," Bryce said firmly. "No," Dominic replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You really don't, but you will." As he drove away, Dominic made a call to Lawson. "Update the surveillance. I want everything on Dr. Bryce Harlow. Professional history, patients, finances, personal habits, everything. Already in progress, Lawson replied. Your contact delivered a preliminary file. Harlow's got an impressive record. Harvard Medical, chief resident at Johns Hopkins, 3 published papers on experimental neural pathway regeneration. Clean as they come. Nobody's that clean, Dominic stated flatly. Dig deeper. The corporate apartment Dominic secured overlooked the city skyline, its sterile modernism a stark contrast to the family home he'd left behind. For 3 days he operated with military precision, setting up a workspace, analyzing information, and formulating his approach. The file on Dr. Bryce Harlow grew thicker by the hour. 41 years old, divorced once with no children, meteoric rise in his field, specializing in experimental neural procedures, chief of neurosurgery at Memorial Hospital for the past 2 years, volunteer work at veterans' hospitals. The irony wasn't lost on Dominic. Public reputation, impeccable. But Lawson had come through with something else. Medical board reviews of 3 patients with unexpected complications from experimental procedures Harlow had pioneered. The complications hadn't been made public, the cases quietly settled with non-disclosure agreements. It's not much, Lawson said during their secure call. The guy's careful, but there's something else. A research grant from Nexus Pharmaceuticals was pulled 6 months ago. No explanation given, but it coincided with the departure of their chief medical officer. Dominic made a note. Give me everything on that CMO. Already did. Dr. Vivian Cantrell. Now working for a competitor. I've set up a meeting for you tomorrow. She thinks you're from the Inspector General's office investigating research grant allocations. Perfect, Dominic replied. What about my children? Lawson's voice softened slightly. They're attending school normally. The girl seems withdrawn. The boy's teacher noted behavioral issues starting about 5 months ago. Dominic absorbed this with a tight jaw. And Nora? She visited a divorce attorney yesterday. Westbrook & Associates, a high-end firm specializing in military divorces. Harlow accompanied her. Of course he did, Dominic muttered. That will be all. After ending the call, Dominic opened his laptop to review the documents his own attorney had prepared, a counter-strategy to whatever Nora might attempt. Unlike military operations, where Dominic had always prioritized minimizing collateral damage, this situation called for a different approach. Nora had declared war by allowing his children to call another man dad, and in war, there were casualties. His phone rang. Wade Thornton. Heard you've gone ghost mode, Wade said without preamble. The guys are worried. I'm handling a situation, Dominic replied. Handling it how? Wade pressed. Listen, whatever happened with Nora is no longer your concern, Dominic finished coldly. Like heck it isn't, Wade shot back. We've pulled each other out of firefights and body bags. You don't get to shut me out now. A long silence followed before Dominic spoke again. They threw my uniform in the trash, Wade. 15 years of service, blood and sacrifice tossed out like garbage. My son calls another man dad now. Jesus Christ, Wade breathed. I'm coming over. No, Dominic said firmly. I need to handle this alone. That's exactly what you don't need, Wade countered. I'm bringing Flynn and Torres. We'll be there in 20. Dominic knew arguing was pointless. 30 minutes later, his apartment contained 3 Special Forces operators sprawled across his furniture, beers in hand. Flynn, the team's demolitions expert, whistled as Dominic outlined what he'd learned. So, the good doctor stole your wife and is playing daddy to your kids. What's the plan? Please tell me it involves explosives. It involves information, Dominic corrected. The most powerful weapon there is. Torres, their communication specialist, nodded appreciatively. Classic Vance. But seriously, what do you need from us? Dominic hesitated. Having his team involved complicated things, created witnesses. But these men had seen him at his worst in blood-soaked hellholes around the world and followed him without question. I need surveillance on the hospital, he decided. Particularly Harlow's patients and research subjects, and I need it done by someone who won't set off alarm bells. Wade nodded. Flynn's sister works in hospital administration. Torres can handle electronic monitoring. But Dom, whatever you're planning, remember who you are. That's exactly what I'm remembering, Dominic replied, his voice hard. I'm the man who eliminates threats to what's mine. Later that night, alone again, Dominic received a text message from an unknown number with a single image. Nora and Harlow entering an upscale restaurant, his arm around her waist, her face turned up to his in adoration. The message below read, "Moving forward with custody filing tomorrow. Seeking full custody with supervised visitation only. Citing PTSD concerns and potential danger to children." Dominic stared at the screen, something cold and lethal crystallizing within him. They weren't just taking his family. They were trying to paint him as dangerous, unstable, unfit to be near his own children. He dialed Lawson. "Activate all resources," he said when the line connected. "It's time." "Are you sure?" Lawson asked carefully. "Once this starts..." "They made their choice," Dominic cut him off. "Now they'll live with it, or not. That's up to them." Dr. Vivian Cantrell was exactly what Dominic expected. Brilliant, cautious, and harboring deep resentment toward Bryce Harlow. They met in a private room at an upscale restaurant. Dominic arrived in an impeccable suit, wearing a false identification badge identifying him as an investigator. "I should make it clear that I signed multiple non-disclosure agreements," Dr. Cantrell said immediately, smoothing her silvering hair. "I can't discuss specific patient outcomes." "I understand," Dominic assured her. "I'm more interested in the research funding allocation and decision-making process." Dr. Cantrell relaxed slightly. "In that case, I can tell you that funding was withdrawn when certain research practices came to light." "What kind of practices?" Dominic pressed. "Let's just say that patient selection criteria were flexible," she said carefully. "Dr. Harlow has a gift for identifying desperate candidates willing to try experimental procedures with minimal questions about potential side effects." Dominic nodded thoughtfully. "And these candidates, would they include military veterans with traumatic brain injuries?" Dr. Cantrell's eyes narrowed. "You're not from the Inspector General's office, are you?" "Would your answer change if I weren't?" Dominic asked calmly. She studied him, noting the disciplined posture and evaluating gaze. "Military." "Previously," Dominic acknowledged. After a long moment, she reached into her bag and slid a flash drive across the table. "I never gave you this. It contains nothing specific about any patients, merely statistical anomalies in reported outcomes versus actual documented recovery rates." "Why give me this?" Dominic asked. "Because Bryce Harlow is brilliant and reckless. A combination that has already hurt people," she said, her voice hardening. "And because he cost me my research team when he poached them after I raised concerns." "Everything has consequences, Mr. Vance," Dominic supplied. "And yes, Dr. Cantrell, everything certainly does." Back at his apartment, Dominic reviewed the data with Torres, who had extensive experience analyzing intelligence reports. "He's cherry-picking results," Torres concluded, pointing to several statistical outliers. "Publishing successful cases and burying the failures. Classic data manipulation." "Can we prove it?" Dominic asked. "Not without patient records," Torres replied, "but there's enough here to trigger an investigation if it reached the right people." "Then we'll make sure it does," Dominic said. "What about the electronic surveillance?" Torres grinned. "Harlow's schedule, emails, and text messages all accessible. The guy should really use better passwords than his ex-wife's birthday. He's scheduled to present preliminary findings from his latest study at a neurosurgery conference next week in Chicago." "Perfect," Dominic nodded. "That gives us time to prepare. What else?" "Your wife," Torres began. "Nora," Dominic corrected flatly. "She's not my wife anymore." "Nora," Torres continued, "had a phone consultation with her lawyer this morning. They're proceeding with the custody filing, using your military service as leverage, claiming potential PTSD and violent tendencies." Dominic listened, his jaw set as the tangled web tightened around him. Dominic's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew colder. They're painting me as a danger to my own children. That's the play, Torres confirmed. But Flynn's sister came through. She pulled Harlow's surgical schedule. He's performing a high-risk procedure tomorrow on a 26-year-old veteran with a traumatic brain injury. Dominic raised an eyebrow. A veteran, interesting timing. That's what I thought, Torres agreed. The patient, Scott Mercer, was told the procedure has an 85% success rate. The actual rate, based on Cantrell's data, is closer to 40%, with significant risk of complications. Dominic stood up, decision made. I want everything on Scott Mercer. Service record, family contacts, everything. And finally someone who speaks for veterans' medical rights. Within hours, Wade reported back with a valuable connection. Congresswoman Diana Kramer, chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee and a vocal advocate for protecting veterans from experimental medical procedures. A quick background check revealed she had lost a brother to complications from such a treatment for injuries sustained in Iraq. She'll listen, Wade insisted. But you need to be careful how you approach this. We're walking a fine line between exposing Harlow and looking like you're on a revenge mission. Why not both? Flynn suggested from his position by the window. Because one gets results, Dominic explained patiently. The other gets me labeled exactly what they're claiming I am, unstable and dangerous. That evening, Dominic received another text. Photos of Bryce taking Mason to a baseball game, the boy smiling up at him. The message read, "Family court date set for next Thursday. Judge Abernathy assigned to case. Known for siding with stable home environments over military parents with extensive deployment history." Dominic's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. Then, with deliberate control, he set it down and returned to his planning. Thursday gave him exactly 9 days to dismantle Bryce Harlow's life. It would be more than enough time. The Veterans Advocacy Group office was modest but well organized. Eliza Montgomery, the silver-haired director, watched skeptically as Dominic laid out his concerns about Dr. Harlow's experimental procedures. "These are serious allegations, Major Vance," she said after reviewing the statistical data. "What's your interest in this particular surgeon?" "Professional concern," Dominic replied smoothly. "I came across his name while researching treatment options for TBI and veterans." Montgomery's eyes narrowed. "And it has nothing to do with the fact that he's currently involved with your estranged wife." Dominic didn't flinch. "You've done your homework." "I make it a point to understand motivations," she countered, "especially when someone brings me information that could derail a prominent surgeon's career." "Does my motivation change the data?" Dominic asked quietly. "No," she acknowledged. "But it makes me question whether you're concerned about veterans or personal vengeance." "I spent 17 years in service," Dominic said, meeting her gaze directly. "I've carried men with their skulls cracked open to medevac helicopters. I've held their hands while they wondered if they'd ever recognize their families again. If Harlow is exploiting their desperation for professional advancement, does it matter why I'm bringing it to light?" Montgomery studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Congresswoman Kramer's office contacted me. She's interested in meeting you tomorrow." "I appreciate that," Dominic said, rising to leave. "Major Vance," Montgomery called as he reached the door, "whatever your endgame is, remember that there are actual veterans' lives in the balance here. Don't make them collateral damage in your personal war." Her words followed him as he drove to his next destination, the hospital where Scott Mercer was scheduled for surgery the following morning. Flynn's sister had arranged access through an administrative oversight that would later be blamed on a computer glitch. Scott Mercer's room was dimly lit, the young man staring vacantly at a television screen. His left side showed partial paralysis, evidence of the IED blast that had caused his traumatic brain injury. "Mr. Mercer," Dominic said softly from the doorway, "my name is Dominic Vance. I'd like to speak with you about your procedure tomorrow." The young man turned slowly. "You from Dr. Harlow's team?" "No," Dominic replied honestly, taking a seat beside the bed. I'm here to make sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision. For the next 15 minutes, Dominic carefully outlined the actual success rates of the procedure based on Dr. Cantrell's data. He showed Scott the documentation, explained the potential complications, and provided contact information for alternative treatments with more established outcomes. "Why are you telling me this?" Scott asked, confusion evident in his damaged speech pattern. "Because 17 years ago I made a promise to never leave a man behind," Dominic answered simply. "Good luck with whatever you decide, Specialist Mercer." As Dominic left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a message from Torres. "Harlow just received urgent call from hospital. Mercer requesting second opinion. Surgery delayed. Harlow headed there now. ETA 15 minutes. Perfect timing. Dominic drove to the parking structure across from the hospital and waited. 20 minutes later, Bryce Harlow stormed through the parking garage to his luxury SUV, face flushed with anger. As he unlocked his vehicle, Dominic approached silently from behind. "Difficult evening, Doctor?" he asked calmly. Harlow spun around, startled. "What? Major Vance? Are you following me now?" "Just happened to be in the neighborhood," Dominic replied mildly. "Visiting a friend. Specialist Mercer, you know him?" Harlow's expression darkened. "You spoke to my patient?" "That's completely inappropriate and potentially illegal." "What's inappropriate is quoting an 85% success rate for a procedure that fails more than half the time," Dominic cut him off. "We're using desperate veterans as test subjects for techniques you're not ready to publish accurate data on." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Harlow hissed. "And if you're interfering with my patients, I'll have you arrested." "Interesting approach," Dominic nodded thoughtfully. "Similar to how you're using my PTSD, which I've never been diagnosed with, to try to keep me from my children." Harlow's confidence faltered slightly. "That's different. Nora is concerned about maintaining the perfect little family you've created." Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're building your life on a stolen foundation, Doctor. How secure do you feel when the ground beneath you is already starting to crack?" "Is that a threat?" Harlow demanded, trying to maintain his composure. "An observation," Dominic corrected. "Congresswoman Kramer from the Veterans Affairs Committee shares my concern for medical ethics. We're meeting tomorrow." The color drained from Harlow's face. "You're destroying my reputation because of your marital problems. This is insane." "No," Dominic replied evenly. "I'm simply ensuring that all relevant information reaches the appropriate channels, the same way you're informing the family court about my so-called dangerous military background." He smiled thinly. "We're both just concerned citizens, aren't we?" As Harlow fumbled for a response, Dominic turned and walked away. "Give my regards to Nora," he called over his shoulder, "and remind her that the custody hearing is next Thursday. I'm looking forward to it." Later that night in his apartment, Dominic received a call from Wade. "Mercer canceled his surgery," Wade reported, "and 3 other patients on Harlow's experimental roster have requested transfers to different neurologists." "Good," Dominic replied. "How's the other matter progressing?" "Flynn made contact with Harlow's ex-wife in Boston," Wade said. "She's willing to provide a sworn statement about his concerning behavior during their marriage. Something about obsessive work habits and emotional manipulation. Could be useful for your custody case." "Perfect," Dominic said. "And the financial records Torres was tracing?" "That's where it gets interesting." Wade hesitated. "Harlow's been moving significant amounts of money between accounts. Nearly $200,000 in the past month alone. Torres thinks he might be preparing to relocate his practice." Dominic considered this new information, or preparing for legal troubles. "Either way, the timing works in our favor. Tomorrow we meet with Congresswoman Kramer." "And then?" Wade asked. "Then we turn up the heat," Dominic replied. "Until Dr. Harlow understands exactly what happens when you take what belongs to me." The night settled, the city twinkling beyond Dominic's window, as he strategized the final moves in a battle that was far from over. Congresswoman Diana Kramer was a formidable woman, with the sharp eyes of someone who had witnessed political maneuvering at its finest. Her office in the federal building was adorned with military memorabilia and photos of veterans she had championed. "Major Vance," she greeted Dominic, her handshake firm. "I've reviewed the preliminary data you sent. If accurate, it suggests a disturbing pattern." The data comes directly from Dr. Vivian Cantrell, formerly of Nexus Pharmaceuticals, Dominic explained. She worked closely with Dr. Harlow before raising concerns about his research methods. "And was promptly sidelined," Kramer noted, scanning the file. "A common fate for whistleblowers." She fixed Dominic with a penetrating stare. "My aide tells me you have a personal connection to this matter." "Dr. Harlow is currently involved with my estranged wife," Dominic acknowledged honestly. "However, that has no bearing on the validity of the data." "It has bearing on your motivation," Kramer countered. "My motivation doesn't change facts," Dominic replied evenly. "Multiple veterans have been subjected to experimental procedures with misrepresented success rates. One of those veterans canceled his surgery yesterday after receiving accurate information." Kramer nodded slowly. "Scott Mercer. My office has already been contacted by his family. They're considering legal action." She closed the file. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve here, Major?" "Accountability," Dominic answered without hesitation. "Dr. Harlow has built his reputation on selective reporting and manipulation of data, using vulnerable veterans as his subjects. I believe that warrants investigation." "By remarkable coincidence, just as he's involved in a custody dispute with you," Kramer observed dryly. Dominic met her gaze unflinchingly. "Sometimes personal and professional interests align. Congresswoman, I understand your brother was lost to an experimental procedure." A flash of pain crossed Kramer's face. "That's a matter of public record, as is my service," Dominic replied. "I've spent my career protecting American interests. Sometimes that means identifying threats that others miss or choose to ignore." After a long moment, Kramer nodded. "I'll have my staff initiate inquiries with the Medical Licensing Board and the Hospital Ethics Committee. If your information holds up to scrutiny, there will be a formal investigation." "That's all I ask," Dominic said, rising to leave. "Major Vance," Kramer called as he reached the door. "Whatever your personal feelings, remember that your actions reflect on all who've worn the uniform. Vendetta and vigilance are not the same thing." "With respect, Congresswoman," Dominic replied quietly. "In my experience, the difference is often just a matter of perspective." As Dominic left the federal building, his phone buzzed with a message from Lawson. "Urgent meeting required. Franklin Park, north entrance, 30 minutes. Lawson was already waiting when Dominic arrived, pacing nervously near a bench. "We have a problem," Lawson said without preamble. "Harlow's making moves. He filed an emergency restraining order against you this morning, claiming harassment and stalking. He's also accelerated the custody hearing. It's been moved up to Monday." Dominic absorbed this with outward calm. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming imminent danger to the children based on your erratic behavior and a targeted harassment campaign against him. He's got the hospital's chief of staff backing his claims that you interfered with patient care." "Clever," Dominic acknowledged. "He's using my own strategy against me." "There's more," Lawson continued grimly. "Nora provided a statement claiming she found disturbing journals you kept during your last deployment, detailed fantasies about eliminating perceived threats to your family." "Interesting, considering I never kept journals," Dominic said coldly. "They have something with your handwriting," Lawson warned, "and they've submitted it to the court." Dominic's mind raced through possibilities. The only handwritten notes he'd kept were mission logs secured in a safe at their home. Nora would have had access after he deployed. "They're manipulating my service record," he realized aloud, taking operational planning and recasting it as violent fantasies. "That tracks with what my source says," Lawson agreed. "Judge Abernathy is known to be skeptical of military PTSD cases. If Harlow convinces him you're unstable, I'll lose my children completely," Dominic finished. "What about our other initiatives moving forward?" Lawson reported. Congresswoman Kramer's office has already requested Harlow's complete research data from the hospital. 3 more patients have canceled procedures pending review, and Torres found something interesting in Harlow's financials. Regular payments to a medical supply company that doesn't exist. Possible kickback scheme. Dominic nodded thoughtfully. Good work, but we need to accelerate. Harlow's playing offense now. We need to change the game. Later that evening, Dominic met with his team in a private room at a veterans bar owned by a former Marine. The mood was somber as he outlined the latest developments. "They're painting you as Apocalypse Now meets A Beautiful Mind," Flynn summarized bluntly. "Not good for the custody battle." "Which is why we're changing tactics," Dominic replied calmly. "Harlow expects me to fight back directly, escalate the professional attacks, perhaps become overtly threatening. That would play into the narrative they're creating." "So, what's the alternative?" Torres asked. Dominic smiled coldly. "We let him win." "Come again?" Wade frowned. "Temporarily," Dominic clarified. "I'm going to withdraw all objections to the emergency custody order. I'll agree to psychological evaluation and supervised visitation. I'll even issue a formal apology to the hospital for any misunderstanding regarding Dr. Harlow's research." "That's surrender, not strategy," Flynn protested. "It's misdirection," Dominic corrected. "While Harlow believes he's won, we continue our real operation. Torres, what's the status on those financial irregularities?" "I've traced the payments to a shell company registered in the Caymans," Torres reported. "Still working on beneficial ownership, but the structure suggests money laundering, not just kickbacks." "And the ex-wife's statement?" Wade confirmed. "She's also provided emails from during their marriage that show Harlow's willingness to manipulate data for career advancement." "What about the children?" Flynn asked quietly. Dominic's expression tightened momentarily. "That's the hardest part. I need to be patient. If I try to see them now, it feeds the narrative that I'm unstable and obsessive. Instead, I'll send a brief, reasonable letter explaining that I respect a current arrangement until the legal issues are resolved." "That's going to be tough to write," Wade observed. "Already done," Dominic replied, sliding a single sheet of paper onto the table. The letter was a model of restraint and paternal concern, expressing love for the children while acknowledging the difficult situation. "Darn," Flynn muttered after reading it. "If I were the judge, I'd give you custody just based on this." "That's the point," Dominic nodded. "Every move now must contradict their narrative of me as unstable and dangerous. Meanwhile, we continue dismantling Harlow's professional life from angles he can't trace back to me." Torres raised his beer. "To psychological warfare." "The most effective kind," Dominic agreed, raising his own glass. "By Monday, Dr. Harlow will believe he's won. By Friday, he'll understand just how badly he's lost." As the team continued planning, Dominic's phone lit up with a text message. It was from Bella, his daughter, sent from an unknown number. "Dad, are you really dangerous? Mom and Bryce say we can't see you because you might hurt us. I don't believe them, but Mason is scared now." Dominic stared at the message, a rare flicker of naked emotion crossing his face before he regained control. He typed carefully, "I would never hurt you or Mason. I've only ever fought to protect people. I love you both very much. And when this is all sorted out, we'll be together again. Stay strong, sweetheart." He showed the exchange to Wade. "They're turning my children against me." Wade's expression hardened. "Then we make sure they regret it." "No," Dominic replied, his voice deadly calm. "We make sure they never recover from it." Monday morning dawned gray and drizzling as Dominic entered the family court building. He wore a conservative suit, his military bearing evident but deliberately subdued. His attorney, Marisol Delgado, a specialist in military family law, walked beside him, reviewing last-minute notes. "Remember, conciliatory but not submissive," she murmured. "We're cooperating fully while maintaining your fundamental rights as a father." Dominic nodded, steeling himself for the battle ahead. his face betraying nothing of the cold calculation behind his apparent surrender. As they approached the courtroom, he spotted Nora and Bryce speaking with their attorney, a silver-haired man whose tailored suit screamed expensive representation. Nora caught his eye briefly before looking away. She wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, the picture of a concerned mother. Bryce stood protectively beside her, his hand on her lower back in a posture of ownership that made Dominic's jaw tighten imperceptibly. Inside the courtroom, Judge Abernathy, a stern man in his 60s with thinning gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewed the case files with obvious skepticism. "Before we begin," he announced, "I want to be clear that this court views the safety of minor children as its paramount concern. Allegations of potential danger will be taken very seriously." Nora's attorney rose first. "Your Honor, we have submitted documentation demonstrating Major Vance's concerning behavior, including journals containing violent ideas, recent harassment of Dr. Harlow at his workplace, and interference with patient care. We believe these actions demonstrate an unstable mindset that poses a risk to the minor children." Judge Abernathy turned to Dominic's attorney. "Miss Delgado, your response." Marisol stood, projecting calm confidence. "Your Honor, my client wishes to stipulate to temporary supervised visitation pending a full psychological evaluation. While we categorically deny the characterizations of Major Vance's service notes as violent, we recognize the court's concern for the children's well-being and will cooperate fully with any evaluations the court deems necessary." A murmur of surprise rippled through the courtroom. Nora's attorney looked momentarily confused by the lack of resistance, while Bryce's expression shifted from smug certainty to cautious suspicion. Judge Abernathy peered over his glasses. "Major Vance, is this your position?" Dominic rose, his posture perfect. "Yes, Your Honor. My only concern is my children's well-being. If they have been made to fear me based on mischaracterizations of my military service, I believe it's important to proceed carefully to reassure them. I welcome any evaluation that will clarify my fitness as a parent." The judge studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. The court orders temporary custody to remain with Mrs. Vance, with Major Vance granted supervised visitation twice weekly. A full psychological evaluation will be conducted, with results to be reviewed at a hearing 4 weeks from today." As the details were finalized, Dominic noticed Bryce whispering intently to Nora, his expression troubled. The doctor clearly hadn't expected Dominic to yield so easily. It contradicted the unstable, obsessive portrait they'd painted. Outside the courtroom, Dominic was approached by Nora, while Bryce and their attorney conferred nearby. "What are you doing, Dominic?" she asked, her voice low, uncertainty flickering across her face. She asked quietly, "This reasonable act, no one's buying it." "It's not an act," he replied mildly. "I'm simply focusing on what matters most, our children." "After threatening Bryce at the hospital, after sabotaging his patients?" she challenged. "I informed a veteran of the actual risks of an experimental procedure," Dominic corrected. "If transparency threatens Dr. Harlow's practice, perhaps that says more about his methods than my actions." Before she could respond, Dominic's phone buzzed. He checked it and smiled slightly. "If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with Congresswoman Kramer's office regarding veterans' health care initiatives. Please give my love to the children. I look forward to our supervised visit on Wednesday." As he walked away, he heard Bryce approach Nora, asking urgently, "What did he say to you?" Dominic couldn't hear her response, but he didn't need to. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Phase 1 complete. 2 hours later, in Congresswoman Kramer's office, the real work continued. The Hospital Ethics Committee has opened a formal investigation into Dr. Harlow's research methodologies, Kramer informed Dominic. 3 more patients have come forward, alleging they weren't properly informed of the risks. "Has there been any response from Memorial Hospital administration?" Dominic asked. "They're circling the wagons," Kramer replied. "Standard institutional defense, minimal acknowledgement, promises of internal review, and the financial irregularities. That's where things get interesting," Kramer said, sliding a folder across the desk. Your information about payments to a non-existent medical supply company led us to discover that Harlow has been billing for experimental materials through standard insurance codes. Potential insurance fraud on top of ethics violations. Has Dr. Harlow been informed of these investigations? Dominic asked carefully. Not yet, Kramer said. The committee meets tomorrow. He'll be summoned to respond to the allegations then. Perfect timing, Dominic nodded, just after my first supervised visitation with my children. Kramer studied him with narrowed eyes. I hope you're not planning to use these investigations as leverage in your personal matters, Major. Congresswoman, Dominic replied with perfect sincerity. I'm simply gratified that proper oversight is being applied to protect vulnerable veterans. The timing is fortuitous. Later that evening, Dominic met with Torres in a coffee shop across town. Financial traces complete, Torres reported, keeping his voice low. Harlow's been siphoning research grant money through the shell company, then using it for personal expenses, including a down payment on a lake house he purchased 3 months ago. The lake house Mason mentioned wanting to visit? Dominic noted, his voice hardening. Exactly, Torres confirmed. Even better, it's titled to the shell company, not to Harlow personally. Classic attempt to hide assets. Dominic leaned back, the final pieces of his plan beginning to fall in place as the consequences of Harlow's actions edged ever closer. And the hospital administrator Flynn's sister mentioned Philip Reinhardt, chief of surgery? Dominic asked. Right, Torres replied. He signed off on all of Harlow's research protocols without proper review. We found emails where Harlow promised to include him as co-author on major publications in exchange for expedited approvals. Dominic smiled coldly. So we have insurance fraud, misappropriation of research funds, ethics violations, and administrative corruption, all ready to break simultaneously. Timing is crucial here, Torres warned. If these investigations become public before your custody situation is resolved, it could appear retaliatory. Which is why we're letting others take the public lead, Dominic finished. Congresswoman Kramer, the Medical Ethics Committee, the insurance fraud investigators, they'll be the visible faces of these inquiries. While we remain in the shadows, Torres nodded appreciatively. Classic Spec Ops approach. Exactly, Dominic confirmed. By the time Harlow realizes what's happening, it will be too late to countermaneuver. The precision of the strike is what matters, not who gets credit for it. Torres hesitated. There's one more thing. Wade intercepted a text from Nora to Harlow that you should see. He passed his phone to Dominic, who read the message. He's being too reasonable. I know him. When he gets quiet like this is when he's most dangerous. We need to be careful. Maybe we shouldn't have pushed for full custody so quickly. Dominic handed the phone back, his expression unchanging. She's starting to remember who I am. Good. Fear is useful when properly applied. What about the kids? Torres asked. Are you ready for the supervised visit? For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Dominic's face. That's the hardest part of the operation. Seeing them under supervision, being treated like a threat. His jaw tightened. But it's necessary for the larger strategy. And afterward? Torres pressed. Afterward, Dominic said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Dr. Bryce Harlow learns what happens when you try to take another man's children and call them your own. The community center room designated for supervised visitation was deliberately generic. Neutral-colored walls, sturdy furniture, and toys carefully selected to avoid any potential weapons or hazards. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Miss Apprentice, reviewed the rules with Dominic in a tone that suggested she'd seen everything from tearful reunions to violent outbursts. 2 hours maximum. I'll be present throughout. No discussions of the custody case or disparaging comments about the children's mother or her partner. Are we clear, Major Vance? Perfectly, Dominic replied with the same calm deference he'd display toward a superior officer. When Bella and Mason entered, they hesitated at the doorway, their expressions a mixture of uncertainty and longing. Dominic remained seated, allowing them to approach at their own pace. It was a quiet, careful moment, heavy with the unspoken hope for connection. "Dad?" Mason ventured first, his voice small. "Hey, buddy," Dominic replied gently. "I've missed you." The boy rushed forward, suddenly throwing his arms around Dominic's neck. Bella followed more cautiously but soon joined the embrace. For a brief moment Dominic closed his eyes, allowing himself to feel the full weight of what was at stake. "Are you mad at us?" Mason asked, pulling back to study his father's face. "Not at all," Dominic assured him. "None of this is your fault." "But I called Bryce." "Dad," Mason confessed, tears welling in his eyes. "I didn't mean to. Mom said it would make things easier." Dominic carefully controlled his expression. "You don't need to worry about that right now. Tell me about school instead. How's your science project coming along?" For the next 2 hours, Dominic focused entirely on his children, asking about their lives, playing board games, and listening attentively to their stories. He noticed Bella watching him carefully, her 12-year-old mind clearly trying to reconcile the father she knew with the dangerous man she'd been told about. "Dad?" she said finally, when Mason was distracted with a puzzle. "Are you in trouble? Mom and Bryce say you've been doing bad things." Dominic met her gaze directly. "I've been protecting what matters to me, Bella. Sometimes adults disagree about the right way to do things, but that doesn't make either side bad." "But you're a soldier," she pressed. "You hurt people, right?" "I was a soldier," he corrected gently. "My job was to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Sometimes that meant stopping bad people from hurting others." "Like the scar on your face?" she asked, reaching up to touch the jagged line along his jaw. "Exactly like that," he nodded. "I got that protecting someone else." She seemed to consider this deeply before nodding. "I don't think you're dangerous. Not to us, anyway." "Never to you," Dominic assured her. "You and Mason are the most important people in my world." When the visit ended, Miss Prentice seemed surprised by the calm, positive interaction she'd observed. "The children are clearly very attached to you, Major Vance," she noted as they prepared to leave. "They're everything to me," Dominic replied simply. After they left, Dominic remained seated for several minutes, his eyes closed, centering himself for what came next. The vulnerability he'd allowed himself to feel with his children was carefully recompartmentalized, replaced by the cold, strategic focus he would need. His phone buzzed. "Wait, it's happening," his friend reported without preamble. "Hospital Ethics Committee just delivered their preliminary findings. Harlow's been suspended pending full investigation. Insurance Fraud Division is executing a warrant for financial records tomorrow morning." "Perfect," Dominic replied. "And Nora received notification as Harlow's emergency contact an hour ago. She's trying to reach him, but he's in surgery until 6 p.m. And our other initiative?" Wade confirmed. "Anonymous tip to 3 media outlets about potential research fraud affecting veterans. They'll be requesting statements from the hospital by end of day." "Excellent," Dominic said. "Maintain observation, but keep distance. I'll handle the next phase personally." That evening, as planned, Dominic positioned himself at a restaurant across from Memorial Hospital's main entrance. At precisely 6:22 p.m., Bryce Harlow emerged, still in scrubs, his face tight with tension as he argued into his phone. Dominic watched, taking a slow sip of his coffee as Harlow paced along the sidewalk, gesturing angrily. From this distance, Dominic couldn't hear the conversation, but the body language told him everything. Harlow was responding to the Ethics Committee's findings, most likely speaking with his attorney. After Harlow left, Dominic called Lawson. Status on the financial investigation. "Search warrant for the Lake House property records was issued an hour ago," Lawson reported. "Insurance investigators have flagged multiple claims for irregular billing patterns dating back 18 months. "And the media coverage?" "First story breaks tomorrow morning. Congresswoman Kramer has scheduled a press conference regarding disturbing findings of potential exploitation of veterans in experimental medical procedures." "Perfect," Dominic said. "Now for the final piece." He opened his laptop and reviewed the document Torres had prepared. A comprehensive summary of all evidence collected against Bryce Harlow, organized chronologically and by category. Financial improprieties, research ethics violations, patient misrepresentations, all meticulously documented with supporting evidence. With calm precision, Dominic encrypted the file and sent it to his attorney with instructions to hold it in reserve. Then he sent a text message to Nora from an anonymous number. Ask Dr. Harlow about patient Scott Mercer, insurance billing code manipulation, and why the ethics committee suspended him today. Ask about the lake house purchased with research grant funds. Ask why 3 media outlets are investigating his veteran patient outcomes. Then decide if he's really the stable influence your children need. Within minutes, his phone rang.
Nora, what have you done? She demanded without preamble.
I haven't done anything, Dominic replied calmly. I'm simply ensuring that relevant information reaches appropriate parties. She hissed, Bryce is being investigated because of you. His career is at risk. His career is at risk because of his actions, Dominic corrected. The ethics violations, the financial improprieties, the misleading of patients, those are his choices, not mine. This is about revenge, she accused. You couldn't stand that I moved on, that the kids accepted him. This is about consequences, Dominic cut her off, his voice hardening slightly. Dr. Harlow chose to pursue a relationship with a married woman. He chose to encourage children to call him dad while their father was deployed. He chose to attempt to paint me as dangerous and unstable to serve his purposes. And now you're destroying him, Nora said, her voice breaking. No, Dominic replied evenly. He destroyed himself. I'm simply ensuring he doesn't take my children down with him. A long silence followed before Nora spoke again, her voice smaller. What do you want, Dominic? I want my children, he answered simply. I want regular, unsupervised visitation. I want my service to my country to be respected, not weaponized against me. I want acknowledgement that I have never been and would never be a danger to Bella and Mason. And if I agree, then Dr. Harlow's personal life remains separate from his professional investigations, Dominic said carefully. The questions about his research methods and financial practices will continue. Those are matters of public interest and veteran safety, but any particular intensity in the pursuit might be moderated. You're blackmailing me, she realized. I'm negotiating, he corrected. Something you should have done before throwing my uniform in the trash and telling our children to call another man dad. After another long pause, Nora sighed. I'll talk to my lawyer tomorrow. Wise decision, Dominic replied. Give my love to the children. As he ended the call, Wade approached his table, sliding into the seat across from him. Phase 3 complete? Dominic nodded. Pressure applied. Now we wait for the fractures to spread. You think she'll turn on Harlow? She already is, Dominic replied with certainty.
Nora prioritizes stability and security. As Harlow's situation deteriorates, so does his value to her.
Wade shook his head slowly. Cold calculation, my friend. No, Dominic corrected, a hardness entering his eyes. This is justice. They tried to take my children by painting me as a monster. Now they're learning what a real monster looks like. The boardroom at Memorial Hospital hummed with tension as Dr. Bryce Harlow faced the assembled ethics committee, hospital administrators, and legal team. 3 days of investigations had uncovered a pattern that could no longer be ignored or minimized. Dr. Harlow, began Philip Reinhardt, the chief of surgery who had once been his ally, the committee has reviewed all available evidence and found substantial violations of research protocols, patient consent requirements, and financial reporting standards. Harlow's once confident posture had collapsed into defensive rigidity. This is a witch hunt, he insisted. Someone is deliberately targeting me. The evidence speaks for itself, countered the hospital's legal counsel. Misrepresented success rates to patients, improper billing coding to insurance providers, misappropriation of research funds. These aren't allegations. They're documented facts. What about my contributions? Harlow demanded. The breakthroughs, the patients I've helped. Your methods are under question. not your potential, Reinhardt replied. But until we can verify the integrity of your research, your license to practice here is suspended. Harlow's face paled. You can't do this. I have patients who depend on me. The hospital will provide alternative care for your patients, the legal counsel said firmly. Your priority now is to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigations. As the meeting adjourned, Harlow sat alone, the weight of his actions crashing down around him. Outside, Dominic watched from the shadows, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. The storm had broken, and the aftermath was about to begin. The groundbreaking procedures, the publications, the prestige I've brought to this institution, which will all be questioned when this becomes public, the lawyer replied coldly. The board is offering you one opportunity, immediate resignation, surrender of your medical license for a minimum of 1 year pending review, and full cooperation with the financial investigation. Or, Harlow challenged, or we turn everything over to the district attorney's office, Reinhardt stated flatly. Insurance fraud carries potential criminal penalties, Dr. Harlow. As Harlow left the meeting, his career effectively ended. He found Nora waiting in his office. Her expression told him everything he needed to know. You're leaving, he said flatly. I have to think of the children, she replied, not meeting his eyes. With everything that's happening. He did this, Harlow cut her off. Your ex-husband orchestrated all of it. This isn't about Dominic, Nora countered. It's about what you did. The patients you misled. The money. Don't pretend you care about that, Harlow snapped. You were happy enough with the lifestyle it provided, the lake house the kids love so much, paid for with those research grants you're suddenly so concerned about. Nora's expression hardened. My lawyer has advised me to distance myself from your legal issues. I've withdrawn the custody petition. Dominic will have regular visitation with the children. Just like that? Harlow laughed bitterly. After everything we claimed about him being dangerous, after having the children call me Dad, you're crawling back to him. I'm not crawling anywhere, Nora replied coolly. I'm protecting my children from the fallout of your mistakes. Our mistakes, Harlow corrected. You were part of this from the beginning. You helped craft those statements about his mental state. A decision I now regret, she acknowledged. Goodbye, Bryce. After she left, Harlow sat alone in his office, surrounded by the accolades and certificates that had defined his career and now meant nothing. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Wrong move, Doctor. Across town, in a modest apartment newly leased for a fresh start, Dominic sat with Bella and Mason, listening to their chatter as they explored the rooms that would be theirs during visitation weekends. Dad, can we put my star map on this wall? Mason asked excitedly. Absolutely, Dominic agreed. And Bella, the desk for your art projects will fit perfectly by that window. His phone buzzed with a message from Wade. Status update. Harlow cleaned out office today. License surrender proceedings initiated and moved back to original residence. Financial investigation expanding to include certain hospital administrators. Dominic replied with a simple, acknowledged. Dad, Bella asked, studying his expression. Is everything okay now? Dominic looked at his daughter, perceptive beyond her years and carrying burdens no child should bear. We're getting there, he answered honestly. The warmth of his children's presence filled the apartment, promising new beginnings and the quiet strength to move forward. Some things take time to heal properly. Are you and Mom getting back together? Mason asked hopefully. No, buddy, Dominic said gently. But we're both still your parents, and we both love you. That won't ever change. Later that evening, after returning the children to Nora's house, their former family home, Dominic found Wade waiting at their usual spot in the veterans' bar. Mission complete? Wade asked, sliding a beer toward him. Phase 1 complete, Dominic corrected. The children are safe. Harlow is neutralized. Nora has been reminded of consequences. Wade studied his friend carefully. And the rest? Dominic took a long pull from his beer before answering. Harlow made a fundamental error. He didn't just take my wife. He tried to take my children. He tried to erase me from their lives. That requires a more comprehensive response. The investigations are already destroying him, Wade pointed out. Career gone, reputation ruined, relationship with Nora over. What more do you want? Justice isn't about what I want, Dominic replied coolly. It's about balance. The ethics investigations address his professional misconduct, but his personal betrayal, attempting to replace me in my children's lives, requires a personal reckoning. Wade's expression grew concerned. What are you planning? Nothing illegal, Dominic assured him. But Dr. Harlow needs to understand the full weight of the choices he made. When you try to take another man's children and call them your own, when you throw away his uniform and everything it represents, there are consequences that extend beyond professional embarrassment. Dom, Wade began. You asked me once to remember who I am, Dominic interrupted. I haven't forgotten. I'm a father first, a soldier second, and I finish what I start. 1 week later, as Bryce Harlow prepared to leave the city, his career in ruins, his assets frozen pending investigation, his reputation destroyed, he found a small package outside his apartment door. Inside was a folded American flag in a display case with a simple note. Some things should never be thrown away. Remember that wherever you go next, whatever you try to rebuild, this wasn't about your research or your career. It was about honor and family. If you ever approach my children again, there won't be enough pieces of your life left to reassemble. Wrong move, Doctor. The last one you'll ever make against me. Harlow stared at the note, then at the flag, suddenly understanding the true nature of the man whose life he had tried to dismantle. Not a dangerous, unstable veteran, but something far more lethal. A father who had been underestimated. In the years that followed, Dominic Vance rebuilt his relationship with his children. He never returned to military service, but found purpose in veterans' advocacy work. Nora eventually remarried, a schoolteacher with no ambition beyond his classroom and a genuine affection for children that came without ulterior motives. And so, the lessons of betrayal, courage, and the enduring strength of a father's love left a legacy far stronger than vengeance could ever hope to achieve. Bryce Harlow disappeared from their lives completely, relocating to a small town in another state where he took a position at a research facility far from patient care. Whenever his name appeared in medical journals, significantly less prestigious than before, Dominic would note it with cool detachment, a general tracking a neutralized threat. The family that had been broken was never fully restored, but from its fragments emerged something perhaps more valuable: truth, respect, and the unshakable knowledge that some bonds cannot be severed even by betrayal. Dad? Bella asked on her 18th birthday after Dominic had presented her with a leather-bound journal for her writing. Do you ever regret what happened with Mom and Dr. Harlow? Dominic considered her question with the seriousness it deserved. I regret the pain it caused you and Mason, he answered honestly. But I don't regret ensuring you remain part of my life. Mom says you were ruthless, Bella observed, not as accusation, but as fact. When it comes to protecting what matters most, Dominic agreed, I am. Bella nodded, understanding something fundamental about the man who had fought to remain her father. I'm glad, she said simply. And in that moment, Dominic Vance knew that every calculated risk, every strategic move, every cold decision had been worth it. In the war for what mattered most, he had emerged victorious, not by chance, but by choice. The end.